Thanks very much. I wanted actually to see if we couldn't get a bit of a discussion going with the panelists, although I feel like I'm sort of in a subway car or something. Yeah. But maybe two questions that I just would throw out, and maybe our friends from the business community could answer that a little bit more easily. One is a question of data centers and this notion that every country has to have its own data center. And I don't know that everybody understands why that's perhaps not the most economic way to proceed, and some of the protections and requirements that are already established in terms of business practice. So that's one. And then the second question is, are we looking at different rules for different kinds of data, or should we be looking at different rules for different kinds of data, given the fact that we're going to start talking about big data? And just throw out those questions look forward.
Well, in terms of data centers, it's firstly impractical, but secondly very costly to business. They have to have data either their own centres or data hosted in centres in different countries around the world. And particularly for small companies who are looking to trade in a number of countries, who are looking for low-cost solutions, who want to be able to transfer data from the home country to another country, and then to a third country in short periods of time in order to do business there. They don't want to have commercial business, and they can't afford to have commercial business. So again, if you're looking at the needs of the architects, the engineers, the lawyers, the consultants, it is totally impractical for them to have data centres or transfer data to centres in every location in which they want to build their business. So that's the first thing. And then just in relation to different types of data, I think it's very clear there are different types of data, and from our point of view, there are no problems as a matter of principle in treating highly confidential, personal, medical data in a different way to publicly available information on what's available at Kmart or Walmart in the brochure. They're hugely different. So it's appropriate that there be rules to deal with issues of privacy. One of the key issues for us, though, is that those rules be appropriate, that they be clear, that they be non-discriminatory and transparent and all of those things, so that we know how to treat the data. And then you get into the whole area of privacy as a barrier to trade. Perhaps you want to come back to that. So, yes, data should be treated, or could appropriately be treated differently, but that doesn't mean that you use disguised barriers in trade to stop the free flow of data on that basis.
So again, I just want to shift the frame a little bit. And I feel like we get into this thing, the first thing we talk about is this new thing out there, we better figure out the rules for it. So I want to just shift the frame a little bit. We probably have the biggest engine for economic growth on the planet that we have had since we figured out that the world was round and that ships could go around it and trade with each other. We could trade country to country, and we decided to exchange language, exchange money, and open the world to what then became an amazing leap forward for humanity. That's where we are right now. We have this incredible technology now that is not only fast, as we know from our laptops, but it is mobile. It is now a technology that means all of the world's people can stand with a computer in their hands. If anybody was watching the news this week around a lot of issues, but one issue being economic growth, I love the stories on whether Bernanke was actually competing with the iPhone 5. I just found that an amazing story and something that one grabs your imagination, because on this thing called a handheld device is a computer that has more computing power than we saw in the last 5 or 10 years. Okay, who is holding that device right now? Right now, the developed world is all over the place. In 5 short years, I guarantee you that cloud computing do for you? It means that the data that is so vital to commerce, to health, to safety is readily available because it's stored in a place that can be reached fast. Do we want to put rules to stop this? Or do we want to create an environment where it grows in a trusted way, where it is accessible to the world, and where it changes fast and we have flexibility to see what the next new thing is? So I just feel as we discuss this that there's a lot of caution that we ought to have with respect to seeing a new thing and deciding, like the butterfly, to nail it on a piece of cardboard before we know what it does. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't want consumer protection. It doesn't mean we want bad actors ruining it for the world. It doesn't mean we want fraud. It doesn't mean we want criminal activity to be going on this technology. That is absolutely clear for all of us. That's no good for anyone. And that is the power of the commonality of government. We have been very much in support of the dialogue between the U.S. and Europe. We think it's been a very healthy dialogue. The dialogue between the U.S. and the whole Asian rim, the Pacific rim, also very good. And all the dialogue we have in the emerging markets, which were formerly known as the developing world. These are emerging markets. These are folks with cell phones. They are folks that have now trade routes called telephone wires that are now broadband connections. That you have East Africa, for the first time, has 3 undersea cables that are connecting the shore of that continent, which were never there before, which means the cost of transport has plummeted. So you see English-speaking countries saying, should we start business here? This is a dynamic time. So it's a time in which trade, in my mind, makes complete sense if we think about it in its best form, which is a real exchange that we're going to, both sides will be enhanced. It is not a time for rule making that is so hard to change in an environment that is moving so fast. It is a real time for dialogue and understanding that the cultures that the world still represents have different reactions to this, and that we need some patience and calm in working through that. But in the end, at this icon, when we sit and talk about the power of this technology for empowering people and for improving lives, everybody knows that it's time to take a deep breath and say, let's make sure this stuff goes forward.
So I was hoping that you would show some of your passion.
Yeah.
Okay. Please, go ahead.
Can I just add something? Another really important aspect to try to find the rules here is to move beyond aspirational, or hopeful goals in the trade agreement. I mean, what the business community really wants some really clear rules that say what you can do, hopefully, to cross-border data flows as widely as possible, and when you can't do it due to some legitimate national security or privacy or protection rules, it's articulated clearly, because we need to invest. We're talking about putting together business plans to decide whether to go to particular countries in Africa or particular. So just having an agreement that says, we hope that they do the right thing is not going to be sufficient to enhance the trade that we've been talking about. So I think that's just really important from our point of view. We've got a lot of the business community are quite jaded from the WTO process, sadly. And this is, TPP, ISA is an opportunity to take a whole debate forward in a way that has practical meaning for the business community. And for that to mean something that has practical impact.
So let me turn to my colleagues from the government. So one of the beefs that people raise with talking about rules is that in this area there are so many exceptions that the exceptions can really eat the rule, and that just as in some other disciplines like in agriculture, there
sensitivities. That then leads to a rather more complicated environment when we're passing agents back and forth. So the agents aren't themselves left behind. It's also the case that in this environment, we have a non-trivial security set of issues. And the security issues are both national security issues, but when you think of it separately or think of it as a particular instance, a serious instance, we have very large cybersecurity concerns these days, and a whole range of questions about what happens with data in the event that there are cyber network operations and do something to the data. Either steal it, alter it, or even create kinetic damage in these cases. So you have issues like that. Privacy is an easy one to identify. Cultural concerns. And of course, anybody in the business these days doesn't spend any time at all contemplating what the cybersecurity issues are. So we have, unfortunately, very difficult concerns of this sort. I would close and say I absolutely agree with the wisdom that we've heard the last few minutes about not moving forward to create restrictions to try to create frameworks for this kind of activity in its early stages when we really don't know how much involved, really what the problems, if any, are going to be that require action. But we ought not lose sight of the fact that these things, the reasons we have so many exceptions in this room are reasons that in many instances are very deeply rooted in culture, very deeply rooted in anxieties about national security.
So, fair point, but I could say the same thing about food that the Japanese in the 60s said the same thing about, ski boots in Japan had to be one way because the snow was different. How do you, Marc and Steve, you want to?
I think it's absolutely right that what we're going to have over the next 5 to 10 years is an ensure of a new economic revolution in the way in which we do business and exchange goods and services. And the last thing we should do in a period of worldwide economic slack is stand in the way of that revolution. But as people responsible for public policy, we also need to address a number of issues that STEM is interfacing. There are 3 that have already been mentioned. What are the rules on data storage? With regard to the protection of the data of an individual and data that can be of relevance or importance for the security of a country. The 3rd issue is one of if you have a provider of cloud services, what are the rights of an individual using those services? Those are issues we have to come to grips with. And then there are issues of a more technical nature where perhaps we can mission bodies, standards issues that should foster the interoperability and therefore the competition in this vital new service.
Just very quickly, comments. I was going to say, and actually in response to one of your earlier questions, different types of data challenges, and I think one of the things that we've recognized in trying to turn some of the US EU ICT principles into hard obligations is there's extraordinary sensitivity on personal data, particularly health data, and of course we respect and understand government's interest in treating that properly and ensuring that it has proper protections. But again, I think that that's one of where personal data, there has to be more, I think, cooperation between governments, more cooperation between consumer protection agencies and probably trade bodies, at least so they understand each other. The second area I was going to mention is certainly law enforcement, cybersecurity, and the fact that so much of the data flows is coming from wireless now and increasingly from mobile devices. That really complicates or can complicate the law enforcement side in terms of the kinds of technology that may be needed in terms of what should or should not be properly protected in terms of of personal data and what is or isn't necessary for law enforcement purposes and how you go about getting that in terms of legal processes. So again, a need for law enforcement agencies to also, I think, coordinate with the trade piece. So I don't know that we have any answers, but I think that certainly we hope that there is more government-to-government work in each of the core areas that I think we've identified, whether it be privacy, cybersecurity, or consumer protection. I think depending on the area, there's more or less, and perhaps maybe on the consumer protection side, there's been a bit more in terms of bilateral agreements that exist. But that's what we see as critically important. And again, in response to Karen's comment, we know there need to be more, not just principles moving the hard disciplines. But I think to really be successful in that, there has to be that other piece, that government-to-government cooperation.
Should also take into account that there's a lot of things that companies are already doing just because it makes good business sense. Nobody really tackled that issue yet. I was going to see if we could open the floor for questions and bring the others into this conversation. I know that our friend YF Lin, the representative from Chinese Campaign Geneva, wanted to make some comments. So if we could have a microphone down front for YF.
Of our total employment. And in terms of the service export value of services, Taiwan ranks 13th largest in the world. Within the WTO, in Geneva, Taiwan belongs to the group of very good friends of services and is an active participant in current discussions on the possibility of launching negotiations for a bilateral service agreement. We would continue our effort to work with as many countries as possible in pursuing an ambitious service trade agreement soon. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Wyatt. So, I know everybody's got a question or two for the panel. If I can invite first question. Very shy. Ambassador Wolf, please. Alan Wolf from the NFTC, please.
Thank you very much. This has been an excellent panel. The first two panels, we had ministers and deputy ministers who saw a clear path through to international agreements on services without hardly a speed bump on the road, which is great. This panel has indicated that there are some legitimate concerns that have to be dealt with. Dorothy raised this key boot issue, and namely illegitimate concerns, where a country, how much do you run into countries that for industrial policy purposes just see things very differently, that in turn, rather than free flow of data, they would say, well, yes, but we want our chunk of the value added, and therefore, we, for industrial policy reasons or protection or something, whatever you want to term it, what we're trying to do is a little bit different than what your objectives are. How much of that exists, and what are you doing about it?
Well, of course it exists, but let me say something about how this world feels a little different from you. And that is that, when I was listening here to this notion that we have to have nations get together to answer the problem. The internet is a different characteristic. It's this huge array of users who have the most transparency one to another than I think we've ever seen. And on a lot of issues, as we've seen in our own country, and maybe we in the United States are a little bit ahead on the curve with this, if something goes wrong, the people scream. So in the consumer space, you almost have a self-regulating thing going on, right? You don't dare use somebody's medical information in a way that hasn't been opted in for. It's almost, there's a consensus that has already formed in a lot of these things. In the commercial commercial space, these data centers have been around for years. We have been dealing with these problems for years. The quality of service is done by contract between players. The nations of the world have different requirements that they would like, usually under the guise of security or national security, and the ability for them to get to the data if they should need it. Most of us have navigated that country by country. When we have been in difficult times, we go and our government is most helpful with us in those conversations. I am not suggesting that with this big explosion, we can still go on that way, and that there's not a need for some baseline rules, particularly around what we mean by security. I do think, however, that, and I want to try to make this clear, that rulemaking in and of itself is what results in lots of exceptions, rather than knowing what's prohibited. If we knew and had an enforcement regime that said these kinds of things will not be allowed, and the nations of the world agree with that, then my own view is that that enforcement regime would set a kind of standards that we need. I think that it's true that different nations of the world would use different arrangements. We're now facing issues on economic side in the ITU, and I won't go through all that with you, but on who, for instance, pays for all of this data, which could start to look like totals on the network, which could do a lot of bad things besides just pay the money to steal the data. All of that kind of movement is dangerous, in my view, to this free flow and to the economic development. So,
I agree that there are real things there. And just one of the reasons that services Roundtable is so clear to have articulated rules, what is permitted, statements that promote cross-border trade and then articulate clearly what is not permitted, is to address the issue of these other objectives trying to be addressed by, for instance, requiring local service. And we see in Asia Pacific, for example, that there's a lot of economies that actually, they really want local industry development, or they really want, technical skill transfer. And to achieve that, they require you to use their servers, they require you to use some of their companies, they require you to share, your intellectual property, because they're actually trying to achieve these other policy objectives. And that's what undermines the whole, free flow of data objective for business. So, it may be that, local industry development is not permitted. That's a different objective here, and it ought not to be one of the exceptions. You can develop your industry in lots of different ways. Every country around the world does it, but you don't have to use impositions on the flow of data to achieve that. So I think articulating what is prohibited clearly, transparently, and ensure that it doesn't become a barrier to trade. It doesn't become something that is saying it's about privacy or it's saying it's about security, but really it's about educating the workforce. That's where the dangers lie.
So, we'll take some more questions. Christine, this kind of gets back to the point that you were making earlier about what's already provided for in some of the rules in the gaps. And I don't think anybody's saying here that everybody should have exactly the same kind of regulation or legislation, but some sort of, I think, Kathy, you said baseline, might be helpful. Do you want to comment a little bit on that?
Well, yeah, and I want to be very careful in doing that, because what I was talking about, and sort of the three boxes, the data flow, services activity, and service investment, again, I was not suggesting that we were advocating one type of regulation over another, but I think just in terms of approaching barriers as they arise, our analysis would flow to each of those boxes to sort of see where What I was saying in terms of governments working together is sort of in two areas. One that I really didn't talk about, but one is in those sensitive areas like cybersecurity and privacy and consumer protection. It's more not that everybody come to the same result, but they come to an understanding of how each other regulate and find a bridge in terms of being able to recognize whatever applicable standards are so that we can go forward and prevent the stopping of data flows. But then there is the other piece, and I think Kathy was touching on this a little bit, which we haven't really talked about, and that is in terms of internet itself. I think we've certainly been advocates of light touch, and I'm not suggesting that there be more. In fact, Marc really the fact that you don't have to get a license, and certainly in the United States, there's none, and you don't have to get a license. And I think we think that's a very important part of the whole picture. I don't know if I'm directly answering your question, but I would say again, we're not in any way advocating that everybody has to do the same things in the same way. It's just so that there's a common understanding and then a way forward.
Are there more questions? Well, let me ask you another question, just from the ICT world, something that we're experiencing with the information technology. When we negotiated that in 1996, a lot of the products and services that we're using now weren't thought of, and we had some interesting ways to deal with that. As data becomes more important, and I think the role of big data is something that's started, does that argue for some sort of more generic transparency and due process kinds of provisions, and sort of leave it at that in terms of how we use cross-border data flows, and how do you challenge, something being really disguised protection that's done in the name of consumer protection? I mean, Marc, I don't know, you guys are talking about all of this with your colleagues from the DG Direct now? Connect, sorry.
Connect. Used to be English, so that's I think for quite a number of subjects, you can basically limit yourself to a number of general rules of transparency, process, and regulatory practice. But I think with regard to data protection, as well as issues of security, I'm not sure that these sorts of rules of good practice will be enough for the system to be acceptable in public opinion, and especially those who care about security. So I think those are the two issues where we need to do a bit more than simply enunciate the general principles and live by them. But on the other hand, it's absolutely true, as is also reflected in our 10 ICT principles that we recently not together in the context of the Transatlantic Economic Council, but let's keep it as light as possible.
So I'd like to give the example of a Kindle, and if I just one more picture. So you have your Kindle in your bag, and you go to London, or you go to Berlin, or you go to anywhere around the world, and you decide you want a new book. You go on and you say, let's see what the bestseller is this week, and you put it, and I did this with my friends in Brussels one day. And I said, okay, I'm now going to get the book. So we're at lunch, and I said, yeah, I have the book. I said, what network did that come in on, by the way? You guys know? Of course, it was one of my friends from one of the carriers who were aghast because they didn't know where that book came from, how it got on my Kindle at lunch. Well, of course, it got on my Kindle at lunch because it's sitting in the cloud, and because a local carrier, no doubt, has some contract with Amazon that says you whisper get it away onto the Kindle. That business case is so different from anything we ever knew about before. We never even imagined that this whisper thing called a network, a wireless network, would be able to deliver this book any place I'm sitting in the world. And by the way, also bill me back on my Amazon account. So think about what that transaction was, okay? It was sitting, the book came in 2 seconds, the data came to me. I got billed back at home, and when I got back on my computer, there was $14.99. I think this is the kind of thing that we're seeing and are going to see all around the world, and to figure out what the rules are. I just like to think about what are the rules for the Kindle. There are no rules, frankly. Right now there are no rules. Now, if that company were fraudulent, if it were doing that, taking the money and running, right, or hiding where the billing was done, we should go get it. Amazon, I don't want that any more than you do, right? So if you just think about this in the way this is evolving, I think it gives us some common sense approach.
Very helpful. So we have time for, please, question over here.
I was having a real hard time containing myself.
Yeah, I saw.
My name is Gene Dalplito. I'm president of the Association of Postal Commerce. Those that know me know I probably was about as much of a comedian as anybody else that was the basic there. But I think one of the points that's lost is Ambassador Verveer's statements relative to the culture impact on it. You take a look at what is exchanged and consumed by consumers on the internet. It's what we might generally call entertainment. And this entertainment is sharply colored by the cultures that create it, and it will be sharply shaped by the individuals of the cultures that end up preceding it. Now, yes, there may not be any rules in your mind for what comes on a Kindle, but I can assure you, if the shades of gray probably showed up on a Kindle in Iran, the reaction that they're likely to get over in Iran is probably going to be a hell of a lot different than the reactions that are here. The second thing is that while we all know everyone likes to play by principled rules, we all know that there are unprincipled players. And we also know that those unprincipled players can come in many shades. And the many shades might be, what does Amazon know? What does Amazon do with their data? What does Facebook know? What does Facebook do with their data? None of which that we might turn around and say is illegal, but we all know that in a sense it affects us. Finally, when you get down to where the rubber meets the road, and we're talking about why would government want to get in and regulate things relative to the flow of information and commerce. Has anybody in this room been burned yet by Boris? I have. And I can tell you for sure that after they steal your identity, after they steal your money, and you go looking for somebody to figure out who's going to be the law enforcement body that's going to go after this person, you don't find anybody. The FBI has got too many things to do. If it doesn't touch the mail, it's not the Postal Inspection Service. And I can assure you, it will not be your local police department, because I've tried that route too. You literally are without no advocate and no protection whatsoever. So don't minimize the cultural impact in terms of its flow on ideas, information, regardless of whether we think it might be for the transmission and the certification of a computer that's being shipped from here to there. There's a hell of a lot more at stake.
Well, I appreciate that. I honestly do. I don't know the answer to that, however. And I think that that's part of the struggle back and forth as to, well, how much do we stop in order to stop the bad stuff, fraud, the bad stuff, the security issues. And where is the line? And I think that's an absolutely legitimate conversation to have. I also think we have to keep in mind what the benefits are as well. And I don't think that local countries should be out of the game. I think there are issues that have to be addressed. And I think any responsible multinational company knows that in the way it operates. Now, they're not all responsible companies. We found one that wasn't, right? So we really do have to figure out what that means and what we do about it.
Christine, you have
Just quickly, and we can have an entire session just on content, and that's something we haven't really addressed, but just want to say very quickly is we have recognized, certainly with respect to the content issue, that it is an important issue for us to address. And certainly it's one that we have tried to reach in our FTAs. And it's one that we recognize extends not only to more traditional media like broadcast and broadcast quotas, but also to new platforms. And so in Korea, that was something that we specifically reached out and tried to see.
I don't think the business community, certainly not the business community that I represent here today, is suggesting there should be, no rules. Again, it's about, law enforcement has been one of the areas, along with privacy and security, that have been articulated as areas where you can have domestic laws. So this is not we're not promoting, carte blanche so that they can be enforced the law, because that's bad for business.
So I think that we're going to come to a close. I'm not sure that I'm going to get sum up here because I think what we did you have a question?
Is there an elephant in the room? Is there an elephant in the room? Is there an elephant in the room called a wicked? And what are you going to do about it? Is it a threat? Maybe it's too late today to do that.
I'd be happy to take you.
Okay, to Dorothy.
Fine, I think Ambassador Verveer probably has a few things to say about that as well. So business and government, please.
I will defer to that. It's been fantastic.
WICIT, the World Conference on International Telecommunications, will occur in Dubai in December. It's a treaty conference, so a conference between and among nations where the nations will agree on what the so-called international telecommunications regulations should look like. First and foremost, it's important, I think, to understand that these regulations aren't anything like the kinds of regulations our Federal Communications Commission might articulate. That is to say, where they are clearly enforceable by some entity that can enforce them, where there are sanctions for violations of the rights. So, by way of shorthand, in my view, what we are involved in connection with the WICIT is a norm-setting exercise. We're involved in a discussion with the nations of the world about what reasonable expectations are with respect to the behavior of countries and behavior of entities in the ICT space. The ICT space in its own right is one of the debatable issues because the regulations that we have today stem from 1988. They clearly were addressing voice-free telephony and not more. In general, it's the United States view that that's about where they should remain. That is to say, we don't want the conference to end up having anything to do to alter the present arrangements for internet governance, which we think that work very, very well in a multi-stakeholder environment. And secondly, there are a whole series of individualized contributions involving such things as mobile roaming or cybersecurity or issues of how traffic is managed that we think have to be attended to very, very carefully so that they don't, on the one hand, again, by some side door that has begin to affect the efficiencies and the organic growth possibilities of the internet. And on the other hand, they don't impair the efficiency in terms of transmission systems that they address. But it is a matter that the State Department are spending an enormous amount of time on with our friends from the interagency process. We have nominated and have in place and leading us very actively Ambassador Terry Kramer, whose background is in the communications environment with a very substantial amount of international experience. I'm hopeful that while it's important that we won't end up doing any damage at all, and indeed it may end up doing some good.
So like I said, I'm not sure that I would dare try and summarize all of the issues to draw some conclusions, but I think that what we've started is a good discussion of what the issues are, and that there needs to be probably more attention paid to having the business folks talk to the trade folks and the folks who are most concerned about privacy and some of the consumer protection issues. We could have taken this in a lot of different directions. I think it's pretty clear that everybody realizes that this is just not an ICT issue, that it really affects businesses globally, depend on please join me in thanking all of our panelists for tackling a very tough subject. Thank you all very much.